Hey there guys, Godly Seafood here. Today we're going to be talking about the best antagonist in the Wizard 101 game. No cap, none of the other bosses even come close to comparing. Everyone's favorite ex-death professor who goes on a grand slam of an adventure before settling down in his homeland only to be terminated by a child soldier, Malistaire Drake.
Into the spiral. With over 30 million players. Cast hundreds of spells. Voted the #1 family MMO of the decade. Are you up to the challenge? You can play for free at Wizard101.com with parents' permission. Rated everyone 10 and up.
Malistaire Drake is the main antagonist of the original Wizard 101 vanilla storyline. Throughout the years, Kingsisle has brought Malistaire back into the picture once or twice, and even provided a very interesting level of backstory in a what-if scenario in the 5 boxes events, showing what Malistaire Drake was like before the events of the original Arc 1 story. Malistaire is a very intelligent and skillful wizard, showing his mastery over death magic time and time again. Not only that, but he's also a very human antagonist, with his motives being very easily understandable, if not potentially even relatable to what we might find out here in the real world. Sort of. Malistaire Drake is originally from the world of Dragonspire that, in my opinion, seems to be modeled after the idea of Rome, at least from my perspective. Dragonspire is a world with a history of constant political changes and a warrior/wizard type civilization that focuses on being physically strong and skillful with magic, and would see many changes throughout the course of its history. It's easy to see how Malistaire's character conforms to some of the ideals and philosophies from his home world. Dragonspire is filled with lore about characters who were unyielding in their resolves and ideologies, never giving up on what they believed in, but also never giving up on paths that would seem to lead them to ruin either. Though we know little about Malistaire's time in Dragonspire, we do know that he was an aspiring mage, along with his brother Cyrus and the love of his life, Sylvia Spitfire, whom he would later marry and would take the name Sylvia Drake. This is actually where one of the 5 box events takes place, kind of wrapping into the story of the what-if alternate timeline scenario with the Doctor Who interfering quest type things. So I never actually personally played the 5 boxes events. However, I have seen some content before it, and I did do a little bit of research looking through all the dialogue, and it's actually a very interesting kind of Doctor Who crossover what-if timeline scenario. I think it starts off with this character named the Maestro changing the course of events, trying to push Cyrus and Malistaire down a different path rather than the one that they would inevitably go on, which causes Sylvia to also go down a different path. But then it's also implied that she was being enthralled or hypnotized by the Maestro, because she's at the end, she's like, I don't really feel like I've been in control of myself. It all feels like a dream. And, you know, we the Wizard come in, help fix the timelines. I don't know if it's directly canon at that point or if that's still an alternate timeline, but either way, it's a really interesting thing, and I think it gives a lot of really cool backstory to some interesting characters, particularly the Drake family as a whole, and you get to see, you know, a couple of different things about Dragonspire as well. At some point, a young Morganth would attend Ravenwood, probably undoubtedly studying under Malistaire directly in regards to the School of Death Magic, and Morganth would actually cause an accident which would have had the potential to cause a great deal of damage and potential loss of life to the school, had it not been for the direct intervention of Sylvia Drake as well as Malistaire Drake himself. This is actually stated specifically by Malistaire when he goes to confront Morganth about her use of deadly destructive magic. Morganth, however, wouldn't necessarily take this with the best of strides and would actually come off pretty arrogant and pompous, causing Malistaire Drake to lose his temper and demand Morganth to hand over her deck of spells. Morganth would then decide, you know what, fuck you, you're not taking my spells, I'll fight you, and Malistaire says, bet, and they just fucking throw down. One thing I would like to mention is that these events are a warped memory of Morganth's perception of the overall events, and are not necessarily a true reflection of the events as they played out. So things like Morganth fighting Malistaire and Malistaire cheating in that fight aren't necessarily canon per se. that's more of just, in my opinion at least, that's more of a, story building element, making it feel like Morganth thinks, because she ultimately loses the fight to Malistaire, that he's got to be cheating in some aspect. That's just my overall interpretation of that fight. After the duel, Malistaire would attempt to scold Morganth, only to be interrupted by Merle Ambrose for his draconian use of force, and is ultimately there to witness Morganth being expelled from Ravenwood. It's actually pretty funny. Malistaire is like scolding Morganth after the duel, and Merle Ambrose walks in and he's like, "Malistaire, what the actual fuck? I told you to discipline Morganth, not try and kill her in a 1v1 duel." And Malistaire's just kind of standing there like, "Oh shit, my bad, dude." And yeah, things just kind of a little bit go back to normal for Ravenwood. An unknown amount of time later, presumably shortly before the vanilla storyline, Malistaire would lose his wife to an unknown, unnamed illness, and this would actually cause a great deal of grief to fall over Malistaire, ultimately changing the course of his life. Unable to cope with the loss of his wife, Malistaire would, from there on, seek the means to revive his wife by whatever means necessary. During the Eye of History quest, we, the player, visit Malistaire's former home and actually find a journal in which the contents paint a pretty clear picture of the beginning stages of Malistaire's quest to revive his late wife Sylvia. The journal entries state that Malistaire had attempted to revive Sylvia several times, but with no luck, which ultimately led him to pursuing a group known as the Cabal. The Cabal would offer Malistaire with the knowledge of an ancient tome capable of controlling life and death magic on a grand scale, but would require Malistaire to steal the Eye of History from the Great Tree Bartleby for this information. Malistaire seems pretty hesitant with wanting to work with the Cabal, believing their means for the Eye of History to no doubt be evil. However, he also comes to the conclusion that he basically has no other option when it comes to attempting to bring his wife back to life. After somehow stealing the eye of a primordial entity whose existence predates the fucking spiral, Malistaire would learn the name of the tome of ultimate life and death magic called the Croconomicon. But then Malistaire would realize that he has no fucking clue of where to actually find the Croconomicon, and would then begin to search for tomes that would inevitably lead him back to Wizard City in order to find a book called On the Trail of the Order of the Fang. So originally I wasn't quite sure where to start this next little bit, because it's not stated but very much implied that sometime after the death of Sylvia Drake and before the main events of the Wizard101 vanilla story, Malistaire decides to take a visit to Mushu in order to gain access to Dragonspire via the spiral key that is currently being held by Emperor Yoshihito in Mushu. This is where our story begins in Wiz. We first meet Malistaire during the tutorial phase of the game, where we learn how to play, and we also end up learning some pretty interesting backstory. We learn that Malistaire, who was the former death professor at Ravenwood, became evil after the death of his late wife Sylvia Drake, who was also the former life professor. Malistaire has come back with his minions from Dragonspire, searching for a book to lead him somewhere. And after our brief skirmish with his draconian minions, Malistaire, who presumably was throwing hands with Merle Ambrose as well as looking through the bookshelves at the same time, decides that he's found what he's came for and just eats himself off to wherever the fuck he goes, right? And after that, we the player uncover that the reason that Wizard City is being overrun with the undead is due to Malistaire's doing. We learn that Malistaire unleashed a number of undead from the underworld, including the likes of the ruthless tyrant Rattlebones, the Harvest Lord, and the Banshee Basila Greywood, and some stupid little evil rabbit thing that KI decided to retcon into the original Wizard101 story for Cyclops Lane for no fucking reason. I mean, seriously, having a bunch of honorable Cyclops honor-bound to serve Malistaire after having lost a fight with them or some shit was a pretty comprehensible story. I don't know why they decided to have this dumb little spectral undead rabbit thing come back and start controlling the Cyclopses under Malistaire's order. It serves no purpose. Honestly, there's just no fucking reason for that. Also, fuck Kingsisle for taking a strong female character like Susie Griffinbane and turning her into some damsel in distress type bullshit. Hashtag Kingsisle is sexist confirmed. They had a perfectly good vanilla storyline with next to nothing wrong with it, and they just changed it for no reason. But anyway, We also find out that the fire elves are being bewitched by Bastilla Greywood, and that the Harvest Lord was amassing an army of the undead with the ability to utilize storm magic as a way of distracting Merle Ambrose and the rest of Wizard City from Malistaire's main goal, which was to find some stupid fucking book. Malistaire would employ the help of a wraith called Lord Nightshade in order to find the book called On the Trail of the Order of the Fang, in order to locate the Croconomicon. After being defeated, Lord Nightshade tells us that Malistaire found the book and has gone back to the old death school in order to study it. And apparently the death school was teleported or transported or sunken down into a realm called Nightside, which is a realm of the undead. And it can only be accessed or found by stupid, dumb plot stuff. I mean, honestly, it's actually pretty funny. I think the quest nowadays is we have to go fight some undead field guards and cut off their fucking heads and enchant them so we can see through their eyes just to be able to find the door to Nightside, which is behind the Rainbow Bridge. It's actually pretty fucking hilarious. But anyway, apparently Malistaire was able to find the book during the tutorial level and has this whole time been in the death school inside Nightside, having his assistant Dworgen read over the book, trying to find the location of the Order of the Fang, the original authors of the Croconomicon. And so after we finally make it to Nightside, Malistaire has apparently already found the answers and he dips. So interestingly enough, Malistaire spends next to no time in Crocotopia. If I'm not mistaken, the story goes like this. Way back in the ancient days of Crocotopia, the Tuts, one of the ruling factions in Crocotopia, decided to enslave all the Manders, and then this Order of the Fang popped up in order to fight the Tuts and free the Manders. Well, the Order of the Fang somehow managed to create the ultimate book of life and death magic named the Croconomicon. And with that, rather than killing all of the Tuts, they just put them to sleep for some fucking reason. And they never thought to, oh, I don't know, kill all of the Tuts while they were asleep. No, they just apparently sealed them away on all the tombs and shit. Like, it's dumb. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, Malistaire comes to Crocotopia and immediately finds out that a member of the Order of the Fang, named Crocotep, gave the Croconomicon to Crocopatra. Malistaire goes to Crocopatra and then apparently finds that Crocopatra put the Croconomicon into the Sarcophagus of Souls. This is important because when the Marlebonians arrived and started excavating everything, they decided to take the Sarcophagus of Souls back to the Royal Museum in Marleybone. That's it. That's the entire main plot of Crocotopia, is the book was there and then it wasn't, and boom, gone. Malistaire spent like next to no time in Crocotopia. We don't even see him in Crocotopia. It's pretty interesting. Ultimately, Malistaire's path would lead him to the Royal Museum in Marleybone. Apparently, the Marlebonians were super smart and decided to put up a whole bunch of anti-magical defenses as well as an anti-magical barrier around the entire Museum of Marleybone in order to prevent magical type break-ins or magical heists. This was actually pretty smart in hindsight, and I think this adds a lot of flair to the overall story of Marleybone. Malistaire decides that if he can't get in with magical means, he's going to find somebody who can get in without magical means. So he employs the help of a mastermind named Meowiarty. However, Meowiarty is currently imprisoned in Newgate Prison. So Malistaire hatches a plot to break him out. Malistaire, along with the help of the O'Leary gang, perform a prison raid and end up breaking Meowiarty out of prison. In the middle of the prison escape, Malistaire summons a legion of undead to slow down us, the player, as well as all of the constables and Scotland Yard police officers, which actually causes them to escape scot-free for the most part. We actually lose their trail entirely. While we, the player, are trying to figure out where the hell Malistaire and Meowiarty have gone, Meowiarty and Malistaire end up employing the help of a professor named Dr. Katzenstein. Professor Katzenstein is instrumental in creating a legion of mechanical automatons capable of getting past the anti-magical defenses and barriers of the Royal Museum of Marleybone. After going through all the dungeons and fighting all the automatons and bad guys and undead, keeping us from reaching Malistaire, we find Malistaire and Meowiarty at the tippity top of the Big Ben Tower in the Royal Museum, and apparently Malistaire was able to actually get the Croconomicon and decides that he's going to dip, but not before indulging in one of the oldest cardinal villain sins, which is to tell the main protagonist exactly where his base of operations is, thinking that the main protagonist cannot reach him. which is what inevitably causes us to have to go to Mushu. So anyway, after finding out the location of Malistaire's secret base, we find out that the only way to reach Dragonspire is through using the Dragonspire Spiral Key, which is currently being held by the Emperor of Mushu. We go and find out that the Emperor of Mushu was basically wounded some time ago by Malistaire and is now in some sort of illness-induced coma. And apparently the only way to wake the Emperor up to get his blessing to use the Spiral Key is to go solve all the civil unrest in Mushu, deal with all of the Onis, and basically put everything back in order. Well, long story short, we do all that and come back and, you know, gain the Spiral Key. That's it as far as Malistaire's involvement of Mushu. Like I said, sometime after the death of his wife and the beginning of the Wizard101 story, Malistaire had actually previously come to Mushu in order to gain access to Dragonspire, which is pretty weird considering the fact that he's a member of the Drake family who originally came from Dragonspire. I don't understand how they do not have their own key. Not to mention, moving forward, we have to implore the help of Cyrus Drake in defeating Malistaire, you know, by going into Dragonspire and having Cyrus Drake basically walk us through step by step how we need to actually go about reaching Malistaire inside Dragonspire. Like, none of the Drake family members actually have a key to Dragonspire. That's pretty fucking weird. That's where they came from. They should have one. It doesn't make any sense why the Emperor of Mushu specifically has this key. But I digress. Throughout the entire time that we were questing throughout Mushu, saving all of the little sheep, goat things, and, you know, helping with the civil unrest, curing the Emperor of Mushu, getting the Dragonspire Spiral Key, as well as gaining entry to Dragonspire via the help of Cyrus Drake and going through the multiple different ring layers through the use of the portal stones, Malistaire Drake has been chilling in the headmaster's office at the very tippity top of Dragonspire, learning how to utilize the Croconomicon in order to control or bring back and then control the Dragon Titan, so that he can force the Dragon Titan to bring his dead wife back to the realm of the living in an actual living form, not an undead form. One thing I'd like to mention is the fact that throughout the entirety of the Dragonspire storyline, our character is only able to reach Malistaire due to the fact that Malistaire's use of the Croconomicon, just learning how to utilize it, performing this ritual to like summon the Dragon Titan or control the Dragon Titan or something, he inadvertently causes all of the dead to rise in Dragonspire. All of the previous dead generals and inhabitants of Dragonspire who were all slain during the fall of Dragonspire. Now, probably not like everybody, but a fair amount of people were like brought back just because Malistaire is conjuring some attempt to bring the Dragon Titan back to life or something. It's fucking insane. But that's not even the best part, right? As we all know, Malistaire's plan was to either bring the Dragon Titan back to life, or it's stated somewhere that he's trying to revive the Dragon Titan, to then control it, to then bring his wife Sylvia back. The Dragon Titan, just to put it into perspective, was the entire reason Dragonspire was destroyed in the first place. The Kingdom of Dragonspire decided that they wanted to be so well defended that no enemy could ever breach their walls. So, they created 3 giant ring walls around their entire capital, around their entire kingdom, as it were. And the only way to navigate through the outer, middle, and upper rings were to utilize these things called portal stones. Kind of like a teleportation crystal, right? Well, some members of the Dragonspire community decided they wanted to join a dragon cult in order to summon the fucking Dragon Titan, a primordial being whose existence predates the Spiral and is one of the main reasons why the First World was originally destroyed to begin with. They summoned that thing in the middle of Dragonspire, and things played out accordingly. Everybody died. Seriously, throughout the storyline, we find out that Dragonspire's greatest defense was also their biggest flaw. It prevented any enemy from entering, but also prevented any enemy from leaving. So all of the Dragon Titan's forces that he would then subsequently summon into the city of Dragonspire had nowhere to go other than to wreak havoc throughout the kingdom of Dragonspire. That is the thing Malistaire Drake is trying to bring back and control. The same exact action was performed by a bunch of cultists way back before the kingdom of Dragonspire fell, which is what caused the inevitable fall of Dragonspire. That is what Malistaire Drake is trying to do. The balls on this fucking guy to reattempt the same failed experiment again that his predecessors attempted. It's fucking nuts, dude. Throughout questing in Dragonspire, we find that Malistaire Drake has obviously come back, caused the dead to rise, all that jazz. One thing to point out is the fact that he also seems to have attempted to bring Sylvia Drake back to life, however, only succeeded in turning her into a wraith and subsequently locking her in a tomb, actually called Sylvia's Tomb if I'm not mistaken. And we end up defeating Sylvia. I guess that kind of means she gets to go back to the afterlife, but then also we managed to trap her soul, or her memory, the memory of her, into a knowledge crystal, which is this piece of magical technology that allows you to basically imprint your being onto a soul gem or some shit, and then boom, you can be resummoned and people can talk to you like you're a normal person type deal. Kind of. But anyway, that's important because by the time we go through the entirety of Dragonspire, we end up at Malistaire's doorstep at the headmaster's office of the Dragonspire Academy, and the first thing we see is this fucker has undead dragon guards guarding a magically sealed door, on top of having a bunch of different specters that he's using to conjure some sort of thing. I'm not sure if it's like a protective spell or if he's using their souls as a sacrifice for the Dragon Titan. But he has 4 of those while he's doing his whole mystical thing, floating in the air, standing right behind the husk of the Dragon Titan, which it's stated multiple times that Malistaire is going to reattempt to resurrect the Dragon Titan. So I'm assuming the Dragon Titan is somehow dead or in some slumber, and Malistaire is trying to bring that back to life. It's crazy. Kingsisle did a really good job of setting up the final villain and his amazing power scale, I guess you could say. But anyway, Malistaire's whole reason for doing that was to have the Dragon Titan undo the laws of life and death, probably with the Croconomicon, and then bring his wife back to the land of the living in a livable form, rather than being undead. Sadly for Malistaire, Kingsisle never programmed into the game the ability for us players to choose to be evil. Otherwise, Malistaire would have won. We basically end this guy's fucking career. I'm not kidding. The Master of Death was defeated by a student wizard who went from not being able to utilize magic to being a Grandmaster level mage in the span of like 5 days. I don't think, like, if you think about it canonically, Wizard City could have been an ordeal throughout an afternoon. Marleybone could have been an ordeal that was dealt with like in the evening, like from the evening to like early morning. So that's like 1 full day. And then let's say Mushu, Dragonspire, and Crocotopia all took a day. Like that's like 4 days that we basically got to the point where we rivaled his power. This motherfucker had been living for God knows how long, and we surpassed him. But anyway, we're the main hero, so obviously we're going to be more powerful than him, or at the very least on par. And well, after our fight, after Malistaire spams a rank 1 death spell throughout the entire fight rather than actually being a genuine challenge. Seriously, this motherfucker casts Death Pixie or some shit the entire round. I've never seen him utilize Scarecrow, and I know for a fact it's in his goddamn deck setup. Well, after all of that, Malistaire is dead at the end of the fight. We kill him. Canonically, he is dead. He is living before we finish the fight, and after we finish the fight, he is dead. And ultimately, he has this sort of heartwarming reunion. If you look at the dialogue, it's kind of weird. He's just kind of upset that he failed, and then Sylvia's like, "Oh, sweetie, that's so sad, but I'm in a better place. Why don't you come with me and we can go to the other side," or some shit. And that's it. That's how they ended off. It's obviously we had to win against the big bad guy, so it's not that bad. The dialogue could have been a little bit better, but overall, it was a great story in Arc 1. And then Cyrus is like, "Oh man, It sucks that my brother died, but he was really just dead a long time, or the true Malistaire was dead long ago or some bullshit, so I don't feel too bad. And we go back to Ambrose. And that's basically the end of Malistaire's story. Just kidding! You thought you could stop the Master of Death? Think again, bitch! Kingsisle reintroduces Malistaire at the very end of Azteca. Well, not the very end, but throughout Azteca once or twice, but we really get to meet him at the very end as this spectre being controlled by Morganth. And Morganth has actually resurrected Malistaire, took his coffin from Dragonspire all the way to Azteca just to resurrect him so that Malistaire could resurrect the Lords of Night, which is something apparently Morganth couldn't do, which means that Malistaire is a greater necromancer than Morganth. Hashtag Malistaire would totally beat Morganth if he were still alive. From a lore perspective, maybe. But anyway, he comes back, and honestly, I know that this is a gameplay aspect, but this is the strongest version of Malistaire that exists in the entire game. He has over 200% universal resist, meaning unless you somehow focus your gear towards Pierce, stack up with Pierce Blades, Pierce Enchants, and then also subsequently manage to do enough damage to him, you're not going to be able to kill him just at all. It's weird. And his return is only barely outdone by the comical outro that he gets when part of the fucking meteor comet of Shabalba rams into him and slams him into the fucking void. This is an act that would probably kill literally anyone else, and so far has shown to be the demise of Morganth herself. This motherfucker comes back from the dead, deciding that rather than being at peace with his wife in the graveyard, he's gonna come back, join Morganth on her fucking crusade to fuck over the spiral, just at the chance to throw hands with us one more time. It's nuts. It's honestly, it's hilarious, and it's just really enjoyable when you think about it. And that's basically the end of Malistaire's story. Just kidding! You thought death could stop the undying Master of Death? Think again, bitch! Kingsisle reintroduces Malistaire for a third and final time in a series of dungeons called Darkmoor. In this dungeon, Malistaire pulls some final villain plot armor bullshit out of his ass, invoking this thing called the Law of Kandavasi, which basically puts up a impenetrable protective ward around whatever battleground he chooses, and only the person that he challenged, as well as their kith and kin, which by definition means friends and family, can enter to defeat him. This explains why other wizards, as well as yourself, can go fuck around in Darkmoor. So fuck anybody who acts like soloing Darkmoor is the exact true way to do things. Like, from a lore-wise perspective, it's friends and family. Looking at you, Ferric. Just kidding, I'm a big fan of your content. Please upload more. No homo. But anyway, getting back on track, aside from understanding that Merle, Ambrose, Cyrus Drake, all of the school professors, as well as literally anybody we have helped throughout the spiral, could have joined us in this fight, disregarding all of that, apparently, after being yeeted by the comet Shabalba, Malistaire was left to dwell in the shadows, kind of like Darth Vader after the first Death Star was destroyed, just kind of floating around in space. While in the void, he claims to have been touched by the shadow somehow and subsequently gained the ability to utilize shadow magic. Police are actually still looking into whom this shadow character might be in order to bring them to justice for taking advantage of a demented elderly in distress. But anyway, Malistaire's invoking of the Law of Kandavasi basically allows him to invoke squatters' rights onto Castle Darkmoor, a property owned by the evil vampire Shane Von Shane. As interesting as the history of Darkmoor is, I'm not going to go too much into that. Just know that Malistaire brings a whole bunch of his buddies to Shane's house and is like, hey, yo, Law of Kandavasi, these nuts. We're gonna chill in your house. I got some friends. I got my friend Octang Wormcrawl. I got Yevgeny Night Creeper and all these fucking undead dragons. And I'm gonna wait for my nemesis to show up. Thanks, dude. Also, I've eaten all of your snacks. And that's how Darkmoor basically begins. And so we, the player character, are confronted by Malistaire, and he invokes his law and whatever. And we basically go all the way through Darkmoor, learning why Malistaire is here and stuff like that. And for some reason, Sylvia Drake is brought back again, kind of in her ghost form. Sylvia seems to not really understand why they've been brought back, but also understands why they've been brought back. She's like, oh, the last I knew we were dead and going to the other side, but then that witch Morganth pulled him from our slumber and shit. And then it's just like, I don't know why we're here in this castle of Darkmoor, but whatever. And then Shane Von Shane's like, Malistaire could never get rid of you. You're his main attraction. And then we fight Shane. Before we go into Malistaire's room, Sylvia's like, I can sense Malistaire's out there. He's no longer the man that I know, but if it's possible, don't fuck him up too much. I'd still like to have something good to look at in the afterlife. After that, we walk into the throne room, and there, standing before us, is Malistaire, exalted in his mastery of magic. And he goes on to, for a fucking third time, shit-talk the hell out of us. And he's like, hey, you know, if you hadn't sent me spinning into the void, if you hadn't defeated Morganth, I might not have been able to achieve this level of power. And then he's like, once I deal with you, I can finally revive my wife Sylvia, blah blah blah. Same kind of plot line as before. And then he goes on to say, I challenge you under the ancient law of Kandavasi, this bullshit contrived plot device that means you get no help from literally any other character in the game. Run them fucking hands. So we do, and it's honestly a really great fight. One of the best fights in the game. One of the best dungeons in the game. And at the end of it, ultimately, we do end up defeating Malistaire. And again, he's like, man, I just can't believe this. I'm so close to achieving everything I ever wanted. All I want is, you know, for my wife to be back amongst the land of the living with me. You know, why is the spiral gotta keep doing me like this? And Sylvia comes in and she's like, oh, sweetheart, I'm sorry things didn't work out, but you know, you're being kind of a dick. And, you know, this whole death magic and shadow magic thing is really just turning you into an asshole. You just gotta let it go like Frozen and just be okay. Find peace in the spiral. And then she fucking gaslights the hell out of him. She's like, if you can't do all of this for yourself, for all of us, everybody in the spiral, and for me, then your love would have meant nothing. And Malistaire's like, oh shit. Well, fuck me, dude. I'll do it. All right, fine. I give. And honestly, he has one of the best villain outros ever. He's like, I'll do this for you, my love, and for my brother, and even for you, wizard. Even for you. Take what you've learned this day and, you know, spread good and mercy throughout the spiral. And this is the part that really fucking gets me. His final words to us, canonically, are, we will not meet again. After going through these amazing story arcs and having him kind of pop back in, pop back out, pop in for one final banger of a fucking dungeon, he leads off with the best line to just end it there. We will not meet again. This is it. You know, I'm gonna make peace with this. The end. That gives me goosebumps, and I'm not typically the kind of person to really say shit like that. I find it kind of weird, but this is one of them moments. This wraps up the best villain Kingsisle has ever written, and it's all cute and nice. And then they walk away into the, not really the sunset, but the afterlife, I guess, and they create a portrait of a spiral, which is pretty cool. And that's it. That is how the dungeon of Castle Darkmoor ends. It's fucking fantastic. Kingsisle did a really great job on this. And so that basically wraps up Malistaire's story. Just kidding! You thought that peace was the end for the exalted master of death? Well, guess again, bitch! This last part isn't technically us meeting Malistaire again, canonically, but rather it's our character's own interpretation of Malistaire in a dream plane called the Reverie. While we, the character, are going through the Reverie in order to find and save Mallory's soul or some shit, we encounter a dreamlike version of Malistaire, and this version of Malistaire basically confronts us by saying, and now, wizard, you will face me, and this kind of like intimidating voice, which, while not just triggering our PTSD of Darkmoor, it also shatters our belief of their happy ending for a moment, which is really great. And then he's just like, whoa, dude, calm down. I'm not Malistaire. I'm not the real Malistaire. I'm just a dream version of him, what he could have been, and honestly what he should have been. I'm a pretty chill dude. Let me help you out. And you know, honestly, it's pretty cool. You know, our greatest adversary comes to us in a really important, imperative time throughout the story and helps us in saving the spiral. It's just great. Like, even if it was just for a momentary, like, little gag, kind of pulling on your heartstrings, I think Kingsisle did something really, really great with that, because they didn't ruin anything. It was just like a, oh no, it's Malistaire. Oh wait, he's chill. Cool. Let's move on. But anyway, so overall, Malistaire's story, while being the first story Kingsisle ever told in Wiz, has a lot of twists and turns with the single greatest villain endings anybody could have ever asked for. Like, seriously, that shit I said about getting goosebumps whenever I read that last line of "we will not meet again," and then watching them walk into the ether or the sunset or the void or whatever, and, you know, go to the other side, as they put it. That shit is just the best. I've got next to nothing negative to say about this boss fight, aside from the fact that he never seems to drop the robe when you need it, and honestly, his robes are so fucking great. They are relevant 60 plus levels later. That is how awesome Malistaire is.
No, I keep pissing.